Hey, what's going on, guys? So this is going to be a resuming of global weather forecasting. So some main topics today: talk about the tropics in the Atlantic, Eastern Pacific, and the Northwest Pacific Ocean, and Indian Ocean. We won't be talking about the Southern Hemisphere in terms of tropical weather. We will be going over it in just a normal weather, like look around. And after that, we'll also just mention, after this topic section, we'll mention global weather. So we'll do like a quick like review of like what's going on every single region of the globe. Try to do like a 5 minute forecast per continent. Okay, so currently in the Atlantic Ocean we have Philippe. Oh, that's way too big. Philippe and Rena. They are close enough together, and they're supposed to pinwheel around each other. Rena, at the current moment, I believe is the one that's expected to weaken first and get absorbed, while Philippe bends south and then turns northward into the open ocean, away from land, which is a good thing. But it might get strong enough, but it will probably get strong enough to emit swells from its center. The water the waters of which it's going towards have been cooled down by previous hurricanes. So Franklin, Lee, Nigel, Ophelia a little bit, although not really Ophelia, just mainly Franklin, Lee, and Nigel have cooled down the waters around Bermuda. So there's no longer, if we were to look at anomalies, just get the zoom in feature. Although on here, there's still warm anomalies where the where it's expected to go. It's not as strong as it is down in the deep tropics where it is right now. Be a lot easier to see on tropical tidbits if I switch over to that. But we'll go back. So we'll eventually move north. It's going to be pretty slow moving over the weekend, but as Monday approaches, it'll start moving more quickly to the north, and eventually start moving up out of the tropics and into the mid latitudes. And we'll see what it does from there. Doesn't seem to be too much of concern, just like Rena is. They don't seem to be too much of concerns for the current moment, but we'll see what happens with them as stuff could change. It could go farther west depending on how strong it gets or how strong the ridge is up here. In the Eastern Pacific, as we hop over there, nothing expected within the next 48 hours, but there is an area of development expected within the next 7 days, southwest of Mexico. The water around here is warm, and the general environment from the Eastern Pacific into the Western Caribbean. In this general area, conditions are expected to become more favorable as we move into October. So, expect to see more storms form here. This is typical during a normal hurricane season. It usually, in the Atlantic especially, even after September, there's a secondary peak in mid-October due to storms forming in the Western Caribbean, and then they move northward and recurve sooner because the jet stream is further south, since it's usually along the southern coast of the southern United States, the bottom part of the jet stream. So we'll watch this. We'll look at some model data for it. The Central Pacific seems to be clear as well for now. So that's it for the NHC. If we go over to the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, we have Tropical Depression 14W in the Western Pacific, east of the Philippines. We have two invest areas over India, over the Indian subcontinent. We have 190B, which is over the Bay of Bengal, and slightly in most of its convection, and its center seems to be over eastern India and western Bangladesh. You have 99A, which is off the western coast of India, around where Mumbai is. So we'll take a look at these as well and see what's going on with them. So we'll look at satellite imagery. Not satellite imagery. Yeah, we'll look at satellite imagery. We'll look at the Atlantic as a whole for now. The Atlantic wide view. So, as you can see, this is where our storms are. This is Philippe. This is Rina. This is the storm system that's bringing heavy rain into the northeastern United States today. And then this cold front is bringing moisture into Western Europe, into the UK. We'll talk about you guys in a little bit. There's still convection. Well, some convection in the Gulf of Mexico, as well as less today. And there's convection in the Eastern Pacific as we go out due to the intertropical convergence zone out here. But Rina and Philippe are developed systems, but we still have to wait to see what comes out of the convection that's over the Eastern Pacific. Switching to forecast models and going away from the United States for a bit. We'll check the Atlantic first. Then we will check the Pacific. Then we'll check the Eastern Pacific. Then we'll check the Westpac, and then the Indian Ocean, and then we'll transition into the continental weather. So, on the GFS model, we have Rina and Philippe. Rina disintegrates as it moves farther north. The GFS has Philippe spinning up rather quickly in the area that it's in. Becomes a major hurricane, even though the NHC official forecast has it only being a tropical storm in its general vicinity. This will create a lot more waves and swells that will bounce out from the center. By 4 days, and that's by around 2 days out because it doesn't have too much space to move. By 4 days, which will be, this is October 3rd, so this will be, I believe, Tuesday. So by Tuesday, it's northeast of the islands. It's moving northward. Passes well east of Bermuda on day 5. And then it gets pulled into the jet stream on day 7. As this large storm west of the UK brings in rainfall. There's that other system in the Eastern Pacific also getting its act together. We'll look at that more closely. And we'll take this out in the Scilly range for a little bit, but this is not a forecast. And then whatever is of Philippe moves eastward. We'll see what happens with it overall. So as that's happening, there's a little bit of a storm system now. It's over the eastern United States, moves off. There's a lot of convection inside the Caribbean itself. It seems to be a little bit of something trying to get together around day 7. But nothing consolidating, really. Good look at the Euro as well. Now, the Euro has Philippe staying weak and drifting farther west and not really developing too much. It does get its act together once it gets farther north, but even still, it only really starts getting its act really together past the 5-day mark once it gets far enough north out of the deep tropics. So we'll see what happens from there. We'll see what happens from there. The rain impacts would affect the Leeward Islands and the gusty winds, but not strong enough to cause major damage from wind at least. Still be mindful of going into the water in heavy rain, since heavy rain can be damaging if it falls fast enough. We'll jump over to Eastern Pacific now, which is this one. And we'll go back to GFS. Alright. Now, we have, in the next 4 days, consolidation along this intertropical convergence zone. This piece of energy right here tries to consolidate into something as it moves this way. So we'll run that out into time. You get a storm that consolidates around day 4 and 5, really gets its center around day 6, and then around day 7 it starts to bottom out. Around day 7, after day 7, starts bottoming out in the strength category, and gets close to major hurricane status. Though this is far out, where the storm is, if we were to look at the environment from a wind shear perspective, there's not too much wind shear over the system, so it can easily do this. And plus, the water around it is warmer than normal. If we look at the sea surface temperatures, come on now, all right, it's also in the 28 to 29 to 30 degrees Celsius water range. So it's plenty warm enough for any storm that forms in the Eastern Pacific to get going. It just needs the right conditions. Let me just also add these two things. We'll add the west and we'll add the east. Alright, this should help a lot. Alright, so there's a large area of around 29 to 30 degrees Celsius waters in this area where the storm is expected to develop. So it have more than enough energy to pick up and allow itself to organize while it has minimal wind shear over the top of it. So the wind shear is north, as this is where the jet stream is. Wind shear is up here. But there's no wind shear on top of the system. So instead, air from the cyclone is fanning out like this. And the storm's able to get much stronger because of that over the warm waters and start bottoming out. And it becomes a major hurricane as it goes and turns into the jet stream due to recurve in its proximity. And this is far out. This is around like 8 to 9 days out. I think this is probably actually, it's not 10 days yet, but this is day 9. You have a major hurricane approaching the southern tip of Baja California. So we'll see how that turns out. But we do know we have a chance of something developing in the Eastern Pacific just after the 5 to 7 day mark. We have to see how strong it gets and when it decides to turn. So we'll keep an eye on that into the future. Have to keep an eye on that. The Euro model, if we look at the same area, it keeps this heavy rain there. It tries to get something going, but it's slower, much slower in the process, and nothing consolidated gets going until later in the run past day 7. And that's much closer to the Mexican coast, the West Mexico coastline. Off the west coast of Mexico, much closer, so we'll have less time to actually start deepening in that situation. If we look at the wind shear, where the storm will be, the storm has minimal wind shear as well. So the minimal wind shear is there. Check their humidity, and the humidity is also there for it. Might be some dry air issues, but the humidity is there. The wind, the upper anticyclone above it to fan out the storm is there, and as the warm water. It just depends where the storm center gets the circulation to develop, and then we can start actually tracking it and figuring out who's going to get impacted. So if you live in Western Mexico, especially along don't know where this area is. If you live along Baja California, just draw the areas. If you live in these areas here, I would watch out for a tropical cyclone impact after this week. Just keep your eyes on the system. Time goes on. Then when that storm does move up into Mexico, the remnants of it will feed any storm system that's in the United States. Now, back to GFS. Switch over to the Western Pacific. Let's see what's happening over here. Alright. 6 hours. Gotta go back. Tropical Depression 14W is already is already has a decent structure to it. So I would expect it to get tropical storm status fairly soon. Does take a while for it to consolidate though. Like even over the next 2 days, even 3 days, the consolidation is not too great with the system. The system is pretty large. And then starting around day 96, the storm should really start not day 96. Around hour 96, the storm begins strengthening quickly as it goes through southern Taiwan, just past the south of Taiwan. It enters the South China Sea. And back behind it, there's heavy rain coming off this cold front. And then behind it, something else tries to get going around where the Marshall Islands will be. In the open Western Pacific. Something tries to get going in this area. Two circulations try to get going afterward. And then they too begin moving westward as the model continues going on. And that first one that develops later on GFS run becomes a very powerful typhoon. Now, switch over to the Euro. Look for a similar thing. Now, the Euro has 14W organizing more quickly than on the GFS, and gets its strength to typhoon status and gets closer to major status faster than the GFS has, and has a Category 2, the Category 3 equivalent typhoon approaching southern Taiwan. Goes between the strait between Taiwan and the Philippines. It enters the South China Sea as well, and then begins strengthening even more deeply as it moves towards southern China. And just like on the GFS, there are also two other systems that try to form up behind what will be behind 14W after it gets its name. Euro doesn't seem to develop these systems as much. That first system doesn't seem to do too much, but it's still there on the model, so we'll see what happens there. Just making sure to see if these storms can actually happen. Check on the GFS. Just make sure that the millibar wind is there. So in general, any storm that does form in the Western Pacific right now doesn't seem to have any wind shear problems that we have to be dealing with. 14W does not seem to have wind shear problems. And then the waves that form up behind it don't have wind shear problems either. And this strong jet stream above the storms will easily fan out any outflow that they do produce towards the east, so the storms can brave out pretty effectively. We do know that the water in these areas is also warm. Still, a lot of this area, I think it's 28 or 27, 28 degrees Celsius waters in a large part of this area. And then in these darker patches, this is closer to 30 in these darker patches. So there's plenty of warm water for the typhoons in the Western Pacific to get going. There's plenty of warm water. There's a lack of dry air, really. If we were to go back to the model, it's a lack of dry air. There's not really going to be anything to choke the storms off. Yeah, barely any dry air to speak of. No dry air, barely, that can actually affect the systems. Maybe for 14W on the GFS model as it's approaching, but once it starts getting closer to Taiwan, it filters out the dry air. So similar to the East Storm in the Eastern Pacific, these storms have the environments to actually develop, but they need to take advantage of it. So we'll definitely keep an eye on this area as well. Even something tries to form in the North Indian Ocean as well. We'll check the entire Indian Ocean. Why not? As you can see, almost the entire Southern Indian Ocean is dry. But if we move to currently, there is This will be 90B. This will be 99A. And we take that on the time. Both systems are stay over land. 90B continues bringing heavy rain across Bangladesh and eastern India up to the Himalayas. This will cause flooding since it is prolonged, as it lasts multiple days on end. But nothing really seems to form or develop in North Indian Ocean. Maybe later down the run something tries to sneak in later into October, but that's way too far to actually tell what will happen there. We look at the Euro model, drag it back. 99A moves into Western India. 90B stays over Eastern India and Bangladesh and continues bringing rainfall consistently. But nothing seems to actually develop in these areas. Alright. If that's the tropical section done, we'll get to the continental weather now. We'll start with the United States. So right now, there isn't too much severe weather in the forecast, at least for the next 3 days. There is some critical fire weather in Utah, in western Colorado, and southern Wyoming. There is an enhanced fire risk here. This is most likely due to wind. Yeah. Enhanced surface winds and dry conditions. So, especially on Saturday, tomorrow, make sure that you're not lighting out or anything, or leaving anything that could cause a fire out in the open, as this could lead to a wildfire somewhere in this area. Wildfire can happen anywhere, but it's more likely to happen in this area because of the dry conditions. Yeah, and low relative humidity. So it's going to be warm, it's going to be dry, so anything that could catch on fire probably will catch on fire in these areas if you're not careful. So just make sure if you have any cigarettes or anything that's flammable, that you keep an eye on it and don't throw it on the ground or anything, as that might cause a fire. And those take a while to put out, especially if they get out of control. Overall, though, if you just switch back, there are thunderstorm outlooks, it seems. There is still general thunderstorms in the United States. But we'll switch back to the continental United States as a whole. MSLP. We'll use the GFS model for this. So, continuing rain over the northeastern United States. There was heavy flooding in New York City today, where a large part of the subway system has been flooded out, and a good amount of roads were too. I think there was a state of emergency at one point. I have to go back and check. But that rain should continue over the next 12 hours from the storm system. And then finally, as Sunday comes in, the rain should finally start abating. But the heaviest stuff should continue for the rest of the day today, but should peter out slowly over tomorrow. Still have some rain over southern Florida from thunderstorms from this cold front. You have a storm system that comes into the western United States, and that is what starts up that next line of thunderstorms in the Great Plains on October the 3rd. That moves eastward, moves into Texas on Thursday. Have a low spinning off the East Coast, and then ended on day 7. Have a cold front that's coming through the eastern United States. If we were to check, could check wind shear. Yeah. Doesn't seem to have that tornado energy. It's not here, is it? A 250 millibar wind. No, there is. So the jet stream is over this, so this might be a cause for severe weather. Especially in that area. This might be the next severe weather thing to watch on next Friday. It's not too strong over the actual Great Plains, but the event over Friday over the middle of the country, it's going to be has a stronger jet stream above to help with it. So V storms could definitely be strong with the amount of energy coming with the jet stream there, and some snow in the Rocky Mountains as well. Heavy rain along with the actual center of the storm as well up in Minnesota and into southern south central Canada. If we were to look at the temperatures for in this position, we'll go back to the very beginning. So it's going to be quite warm in the southeast. Well, southeast United States, Florida obviously, the Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, the middle of the country, warm 90s. Consistent. Still cool in the northeast due to rain, but in Quebec it's going to be warm. Maybe 97 degrees in eastern Arkansas on Saturday, which is tomorrow. Warms up for the next day. Continuous warmth, so it drops into the 70s and 60s at night, so it's probably also humid in these areas. In the western United States, it's starting to become cold in the mountaintops, on top of the mountains, below freezing, so it can support ice. Still warm in California over there, but not too hot. Not very hot in the desert either. Majority of the warmth is concentrated in the eastern United States. Still warm in the Mississippi Delta, eastern Texas, the eastern Great Plains, Missouri, Iowa. You can see the cold front starting to come through with this little jagged line. Yeah, jagged line, cold front starting to come through. Heat's starting to get pushed out as the storm system moves through. You have these 40s dipping below, so that should be nice and refreshing from the heat that you just experienced. And then as towards the end of the week, warmer temperatures move through the rest of the eastern United States. Northeast finally has that cooler air whisked away. It's going to be a warm October to start off. Still warmer in California. A bit chilly in the northwest, but that's kind of expected. Maybe 90s in the Central Valley. Cold in Colorado and the mountains. It's decently cold as well. And then finally, as we're entering day 7, still gets warmer in the western United States. And the cold front finally puts through the majority of the center of the country on day 7. Warms up and is pleasant behind it, but it's still warm on the East Coast. It's starting to become hot again in the western United States. I also expect it, since it is in front of the cold front, to be humid as well with the heat. Could use North America as a guidepost, but this view doesn't look too great. Now, it will be cold in Alaska, below freezing in a lot of places. It is starting to become winter in the northern hemisphere, so this is expected. Still very warm in Mexico as well. And in the Caribbean. This isn't too out the ordinary. Out the ordinary. Showers and thunderstorms during the day. Towards the evening. So hot during the day and then showers and thunderstorms later. In the tropics down here. Still warm in Mexico. Cold front cleans through the eastern United States. Cooler in Alaska. Most of Canada, at least in the southern fringes, is still warm, but the northern fringes are not. But not too much to talk about, really. Look at precipitation as well. You do have some storms that are coming close to Alaska. As we go past. Like that one in 2 days out, which will be, I think, Monday. No, this will be Sunday. Brings snow into the west, into the mountains. This is Philippe out there as well. But nothing too major. Switching over to Europe now. Switch directly over to Europe. I know in the UK you guys just had a strong windstorm come through. I will say your next bout of rain is in about 24 hours. So you get in the UK and Ireland, you'll get rain in 24 hours. That should last about 12, 18 hours. You get a break. And you get more rain coming in to southern England especially. 4 days from now. No, not 4 days from now. 3 days from now, so that will be Monday. That rain spreads over Europe, over the rest of Europe into northern Germany, to Poland, eventually through the Baltic states. Have snow in the higher elevations of Norway and in Iceland. Have more rain in the northern UK. Heavy rain in western Norway due to the mountains and snow in higher elevations. And you have a strong storm that's pretty far away from the UK that's bringing severe winds south of where Iceland is, and it's bringing snow to the island. While on the 7-day mark, you have this cold front that's bringing rain into Western Ireland and should eventually, don't know what it's going to do down here, but should eventually affect more of Europe later on in the run. In the Mediterranean, there's a little bit of rain in Greece and in Turkey, but not too much. This is good news. This should lower down the flooding that you guys have been experiencing there. So, it's a good sign because you guys did have terrible flooding. So, this sunshine is a welcome relief from that. For you did need the rain for the wildfires. Now, as temperatures, it's going to be pretty warm across most of Europe, especially Eastern Europe, Ukraine, Belarus, Southeast Europe. It's going to be quite hot in Spain, 30 degrees Celsius. It's pretty warm. In the UK, it shouldn't be too warm. It's going to be chilly at night, 10 degrees Celsius. It's about 50 degrees if you translate that to Fahrenheit. On Sunday, it's a bit warm. In France, it's going to be warm. Well, Germany's going to be warm. France is going to be hot. UK is going to be warm, but not too bad, I would say. Warm in Italy and in Spain. Cooler air pushes through Eastern Europe, so it should be more pleasant over there. Temperature-wise, gets hotter in France. It's hotter in France on Monday. Looking at upper 30 degrees Celsius or higher. So, I don't know if there's AC around here, but it's going to be quite warm for October. Gets warmer in Germany and Poland, back to around 26 degrees Celsius. Very warm for this time of year, I think. It does cool down though, which is nice. And then towards the end, Eastern Europe becomes chilly. And there's still warmth in Western Europe. So there seems to be a heat wave of some kind in Western Europe over the next week. But overall, for most of Europe, temperatures aren't too bad. We will switch gears to where we want to go. We'll switch gears to just Asia in general. And then we'll get East Asia. So we'll talk about everything except for East Asia here. Zoom this out back here. Pretty warm in Western Russia. In Siberia, it's not super cold yet. It's still September, although that does seem to be coming. With this cold air draining in, that is coming. Just temperature forecast. Still very warm in the Middle East. Especially over the Persian Gulf, still very warm. Not as it was in peak summer, but it's still very warm. Consistent days around 40 degrees Celsius in the Arabian Peninsula and in Pakistan and Iran. Cooler in the Turkish mountains. Cold in the Tibetan Plateau, obviously. Still warm in Russia and in Kazakhstan. It is still very hot closer to the Arabian Sea. Siberia is not too much cold air has been building up there just yet. Although it is coming eventually. Pretty warm in the interior deserts of China. And that's where we're going to leave off for temperatures. Can look at rainfall. Now, I think as a general story, Even in the Middle East, not too much rainfall coming. Might get some rain around the Caucasus Mountains within. You guys will get some rain in Caucasus Mountains around 4 to 5 days from now. You do have rain coming into western Russia and into northern Russia. You do have snow falling over Siberia. There's still plenty of rain coming in. You do have a relatively strong storm over where St. Petersburg is in western Russia, southern Finland. That brings rain and moves over Russia. And then you have, towards the end of the run, cold air spilling in, bringing some snow to northwestern Russia. Overall, not too much there either. East Asia, we mentioned the typhoon, so we won't talk about that. Still some monsoonal rain in Southeast Asia. And get some rain coming into Japan. For some cold fronts, you'll get some rain coming into Japan on Saturday. Persistent eastern Japan on Sunday. Clears out. You do have some rain over China, but not too much. A little bit more rain comes into Japan, especially the northern island chain, island Hokkaido up there. More rain comes off the Sea of Japan and into northeast Japan. Get a high pressure that forms over the Sea of Japan. And you have more snow that's falling into the Tibetan Plateau. And then that's roughly around where the typhoon, which was 14W right now, begins moving closer into southern China. Still consistent rains in Southeast Asia and the Philippines. If we look at the temperature, hot in Southeast Asia, which is expected. Go back here. Warm in southern China, 30 degrees Celsius. In northern China, north of Shanghai, in 26 degrees Celsius, 80 degrees. And then in Manchuria, it's warm, but it's not too warm. That continues for a second day. Another day. Seems to be in Korea, and both the Koreas is still pretty cool. It's not too hot. Japan as well. Tokyo might be a little bit probably be warm on Tuesday. I'm seeing a little bit of like purple in there, so it's probably approaching 30 degrees Celsius. Approaching that in parts of southwest Manchuria too. Beijing should be sitting at a nice 26 degrees Celsius. Still pretty warm in China, for the most part. Is cold air coming down out of Siberia, but not too strong. There is cold air getting into North Korea later into the run. But this is a general guide. Cool air does spill into the Korean Peninsula, but it should stay pretty comfortable in Korea and in Japan from the rain and cool air. And China in general is just going to stay warm for the remainder of the week. Mainland China and Taiwan. But Taiwan's going to have to deal with a typhoon on day 5. Switching gears to the other hemisphere, we'll talk about South America, South Africa, and Australia. Mention these areas, and then we'll end the video. South America, it is still pretty hot down there. 40 degrees Celsius in the middle of the Amazon. That's not too great. But it is starting to become spring down here. It is now officially spring. So temperatures should start warming up. But we'll look at rainfall first. So, you have some rain in Peru right now. This is from daytime heating. You do have a storm off the coast of Uruguay. You have a storm that moves into southern Chile that brings snow into the southern mountains here, southern Andes here. Brings a little bit of rain farther north into the country, but not too much. And another little storm that pops up also over off the east coast of Brazil. I have some rain in Argentina, and some strong thunderstorms that form afterward. That's a very strong storm. and then that pulls away. I will check, see for wind shear if I can. That doesn't align perfectly, but storms should be strong enough, so you might get some damaging winds out of those storms. Out of these storms here. But that's mainly heavy rainfall threat, so we'll check how much would actually be falling. Accumulate precip. Yeah, so you're looking at around 45 millimeters of rain, which translates to around 2 inches, so decent amount of rain coming out of those storms in a few days. And then that scoots off, and some cold air pours in behind it. Same general theme. Very hot over Brazil, over most of Brazil, except for the southeastern part, closer to Argentina and Uruguay. Very warm in northern Argentina, approaching 30 degrees Celsius for much of northern Argentina. Closer to Buenos Aires is cooler. Continue. 47, approaching 50 degrees Celsius in this is Paraguay. It's very hot. It's very warm for this time of year. I believe they approached this on the last day of winter. If I'm not correct, I think I'm correct about that. They approached that recently. Cools off. Some very chilly air around freezing. Approaches eastern Argentina around Buenos Aires. That might be a shock to some people. Warms right back up. Still very hot in the Amazon. And on day 7, it's like this over most of Brazil. And still some more snow falling in the southern Andes. We'll hop over to Australia now. As a whole. From here, I think you guys kind of expect it. Still hot. As always, it's Australia. Not so much in the southwest part, in the southeast, but most of the continent is over 30 degrees Celsius, and in many areas it's approaching 40 degrees Celsius. It is starting to warm up here, so these waters north of the continent are going to start warming up pretty quickly. That continues for the next few days. It is cool in eastern Australia and southwest. I think this is due to a cold front pushing away the warm air, the hot air. Yeah, that's due to a cold front pushing away the hot air. It brings relief to a lot of southern Australia. You see this dividing line. South of the cold front, comfortable temperatures. North of it, very hot. Continues. Maybe a little bit of freezing in the higher elevations of southeast Australia. Still pretty cool. And then on day 7, might get some freezing temperatures in Australia. But the warmth starts coming back to Western Australia later down the run. We'll look at rain as well. Okay, start from the very beginning. Get some rain that comes into southwest Australia. In southern Australia, get some rain. Low pressure system comes on shore within 5 days. Bring some heavy rain in eastern Australia. That should be of concern. And then it moves over. Bring some onshore winds. Could bring some coastal flooding with this heavy rain and the wind coming onshore. And then, just in general, it seems calm after that point. Some rain action in northern Australia from just a little bit of monsoon, but not too much going on here either, which is good. Hope you guys are enjoying yourselves down there. Look at North Africa, and then we'll look at South Africa as well. Alright, North Africa. What we're looking for, more convection firing in the Sahel and Sub-Saharan Africa. This is feeding the Atlantic hurricane season. These waves will continue to come off and go into the Atlantic, and will be a problem. Later on in the cycle as they move into the Caribbean, and then they develop there when they have more time. We'll only look out to 7 days, but identify some strong boys that come off. So we're looking. Doesn't seem like too many strong winds come off. Convection seems to be a little bit weaker, but we'll see what happens. We'll probably have to watch for maybe this one. Probably have to watch for this one. This as it comes off, and then whatever else forms behind it. Because it's still monsoon season there. Check temperatures. I think everyone knows what's going to be hot, especially in Sudan for some reason. Hot in Sahara Desert. That's not too inconspicuous. 4 degrees Celsius, 30 degrees Celsius over a large area. 4 degrees in some areas, especially like northern Mali. Warm and humid inside where the monsoon is tracking through. Consistently every day. Consistent 20 to 25 degrees Celsius nights. And 30 degrees Celsius afternoons. Not too bad. So, weather's not too unstable. This freckling here is from the thunderstorms. And we'll look at Southern Africa finally to end off the video. Go back. Very warm. It is dry season down here, so it makes sense. And that theme stays consistent throughout most of the week. 30 degrees Celsius, especially in Mozambique, approaching 40 degrees Celsius. Is very hot, can lead to fires if something that's being burned isn't properly maintained. For Angola, Namibia, Botswana. Extreme northeast South Africa as well. The western coast of Madagascar. The southern Republic of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Over much of Tanzania, Kenya, Somalia. Very warm, as expected for this time of year. And then that expands over South Africa later. But it seems that the cooler air from the mid-latitude cyclones misses South Africa. But over the next this first wave over the next 2 days will keep it cool for a little bit of time. Also look at rainfall as well. Some rain over the Congo. This makes sense. Little rain over Southern Africa itself. Some rain coming to South Africa from that wave. Cold front that comes through. But not much afterward for the remainder of the week. Alright guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative for you. Guys. So, we covered everyone. We did the tropics. We covered basically everything. Don't see any real major issues coming soon, weather-wise, besides the tropical stuff, and maybe that severe weather outbreak in the United States. But yeah, I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.